Cowan to conduct roll call, please. I'm here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
And Ms. Cowan, was the notification and posting a meeting agenda completed in accordance with state law? Thank you. Gentlemen, before you is the agenda. And when satisfied, we'll need a motion to approve or
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to remove under, I guess it's paragraph 3 or section 3, numeral 5, subparagraph A, operational funding request. I believe we addressed this last month, and I would like to make a motion to have that item stricken from the agenda.
You need a second on that item? We need a second?
Yeah, and we're, yep, waiting
Okay.
on,
All right, I'll second that.
probably motion and seconded to remove from consideration item number 5A from action items. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Okay, yes, sir.
this item it was, as Councilman Brock made mention, item came up on the last meeting. We have it back on the floor tonight. My question before we go into a vote, is this going to be something continuously? If it's voted down?
Great question. It was my understanding, and the reason why I added it to this agenda, number one, it was requested, but number two, there were going to be material changes which may change the opinions of the voting body. That was my understanding. So worst case, you hear it. If you don't agree, no issue.
Question.
But that was my guidance when asked, would we put this back on? I said, I will not do it unless it's a material change. Yes, sir.
Yes. So my question might be directed to to legal counsel, Mr. Meigs. So moving forward, if this continues, what do we have in place to mitigate that situation?
Councilman, there's no, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the mic. How are we doing over there? Okay. Councilman, there's no hiatus for a measure for council except for rezoning requests of the same variety on the same property, which under your code require a 1-year delay before a proponent can come back through the process for rezoning for a piece of property under the same proposal as had been previously submitted. So there's no impediment to matters appearing on your agenda repetitively, as some might argue that this is a redundant appearance of this request on your agenda, but there's no legal impediment to that reappearing. It's just a matter of council making a determination that the request is merited or not. I think there may be some discussion about having a policy of dealing with A-tax and H-tax requests going forward, but again, that would just be a policy, and it could be disturbed at your pleasure because y'all ultimately are the decision makers here. So there's nothing that would prohibit this from being back on the agenda in the same format that was in the same proposal that it was presented last month, or in prior times.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other comments? Call the question. The question is to remove 5 alpha from paragraph 3 action items. So all in favor of removing 5 alpha, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
No. I request a roll call. I am a no.
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 Yes.
Yes.
Okay, any other recommend changes to the agenda for tonight?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Probably motion and second to approve the agenda for tonight as presented. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, the agenda is approved. Thank you. I will join Councilman Griffin for the pledge and invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father God, it's in your precious name we come with bowed heads and on our hearts. We ask, Lord, for your wisdom and your guidance. Pray, Father, that you give us the help so that we may do those things that are beneficial for the common good. We ask, Lord, that you continue to bind us together, keep us safe. Know that we are running to this pandemic and COVID-19. We know it's all in your hands. No, Father, that we can't do anything other than what all to do, all power is with you. Father, at this time, forgive me. I do not lesson for the Blake family and another African American shot 7 times in the back. Bless our prayer for his family. Father, we also ask you to bless and pray for police officers, I understand, Father, that this may not be a situation that people are concerned about. And some might be concerned with certain reasons. But as an African American man with son, this does weigh real heavily on my heart. I think that is something that I have to say tonight because it is now time that we do work together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll move to council members' remarks. We'll start on the right and go left tonight. Councilman Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Just have 2 comments. The first comment is that I was fortunate enough to attend the Purple Heart Day celebration. Mayor Franklin, you did a fantastic job as our host and MC. Councilman Ballman, you did a fantastic job delivering the invocation. Sloan, you did a fantastic job of being present. And I was looking for you, Larry. Anywho, it was a fantastic celebration. Brigadier General Beagle gave a fantastic speech and a great event that we can look forward to year in and year out. And if it pleases Mr. Mayor and the rest of the council, I would like to recognize Captain Duke to give us a brief PSA, for lack of a better word. I don't know how many people are aware, but a trafficker was arrested in Blythewood in this as a father of 2 young children, 9 and 7. This is a little alarming. It just goes to show that no matter how fantastic your community is, you're not going to be able to get away from everything. So if Captain Duke doesn't mind giving us a 3 to 5 minute PSA on what to look for, what to do if we spot anything. Not to steal your thunder, but thank you for coming, Captain Duke.
Thank you for having me, Your Honor, and council members. Everyone's seen the news reports where around Top Church, we, after an extensive 3-year investigation with local agencies involved as well as federal agencies, were able to make an arrest regarding human trafficking as well as narcotics violations. It's still unfolding and ongoing, so I can't go too much in depth other than what's been publicly released. But with human trafficking, something I would ask you to consider, if you have young children, if you're a school teacher, where you may interact with folks that have such access to technology. There are apps out there, Snapchat, Kick, where folks can make contact with children. And normally they're going to seek out children that may be a bit introverted, withdrawn. Things to look out for, though, is suddenly becoming secretive with their phone. They want to hang out with people that you don't know. They start having a taste for hanging out with older folks. If you're dealing with mid-teens and there's an interest in someone extremely older than them, those are definitely cues to look forward to. Federally, there are guidelines to what sex trafficking is versus labor trafficking. That's being held by coercion, fraud, some force. But they attach the age of 18 and below. In Richland County, we're looking at this holistically from all ages, because several of the people we've encountered are basically modern-day slaves, where maybe there's a narcotic aspect, maybe they're just being held because they're afraid something's going to happen to them or their family. Essentially, though, this all started in one place, and it's not always the main precursor, but the withdrawn, the ones that are always the wallflowers that are looking for the attention that someone's going to go by and give them the attention that they are craving, and they become willing to do anything to please this person. Things that I ask that you look forward to, especially dealing with children, teenagers, or preteens, check their social media, check their phones, see who they're communicating with. If they've got extracurricular activities after school, that's fantastic. They're being involved, but make sure that once the activity's done, there's nothing continuing after the fact. If they're supposed to be coming home at a certain time, they're not hanging out with someone you suddenly don't know, because it feels very much like it was in the 70s and 80s, where you had to worry about taking candy from strangers because you might get snatched into a car. While we've had several reports of incidents of that happening throughout the Midlands, most commonly we're finding other means, either in-person interactions where they're drawing somebody in because they know they can make them feel better about themselves and they've got them on the hook, or social media. You never know who's on the other end of a snap or a direct message. I would ask that if you've got young children, please talk to them about it. Monitor their social media. I understand giving trust and teaching them the value of trust, but you've got folks that are coming around being extremely devious, trying to undermine good parenting. Well, they're trying to undermine your good parenting. There's also several other online interactions where you can have gaming. If you've got a child that likes to do Xbox 360, Xbox One, PlayStation Live, any of that, they may also encounter people that could be monitoring them through other means by the game. They may think they're talking to another 10-year-old boy, and really it could be a 40-year-old man that's plotting. I just ask that look out for these things. There's certainly more information that can be disseminated at request or even further training where we have more time to discuss and do a question and answer. Councilman?
Thank you, Captain.
Thank you, Captain Dukes. We appreciate it.
That concludes my remarks,
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Mayor. Thank you.
Councilman Sloan Griffin.
Sir, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad you all could be here. Glad you all are safe. Please be reminded that COVID is still out there. Do yourself a favor, your family and your friends. do your best to protect yourself, wear your mask, and use social distancing where it applies. I would also like to say happy 10th month to my son Tristan. That has like 5 teeth coming in now, so enjoying that. Also would like to say welcome home to Matt and Libby Wright, beloved pet Jack. He ran away for 8 days and automatic showed back up. Welcome home to Jack. I treated him to a nice big bone, and he's happy. So also would like to say to Blythewood Cigar and Wine, they celebrated their 1-year anniversary here in Blythewood over the weekend. Different music and events over there this weekend. So hope you all got out to enjoy that and keep supporting them because that's the future of Blythewood. We want to support all businesses in the area, and we're glad that they're still here 1 year later. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. Again, welcome everybody. I appreciate y'all showing up tonight. Appreciate the input y'all have. Look forward to hearing what you have to say. Blythewood had a busy month, a busy couple of weeks here in August with Councilman Brock alluded to the Purple Heart recognition and proclamation. Was very humbled to share the stage with such distinguished gentlemen and service members to represent the United States Navy and represent our town. And then I want to congratulate Cobblestone Park and the town of Blythewood for putting on such an awesome event last weekend with that golf tournament with the ladies. It just, even with the bad weather, it went really, really well. And on top of that, I just, want to lift up Buck and Christy Coggins after having such a successful thing to have such a tragedy happen in their family. I just ask that you would continue to pray for Buck and Christy over their loss. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilman Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman, following ditto to everything that everybody said, we're glad to have you here tonight, and those who may be screaming in. I'm not going to take your thunder, Mr. Mayor, since you're going to be talking about the Purple Heart. I do and would like to thank the Chronicle and the Voice for this past weekend, coming out and doing a drive-by for my uncle who's 79 years old and in hospice. And they did an excellent job coming out at the last minute, showed his support. It was a true humanitarian story, and we really appreciate the press for giving him his day in the sun. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be brief as well. The council members have done an excellent job. Coming up in September, we're going to start having some more open-air events here in the park. I'm encouraged with that. Labor Day, please be safe if you're going to travel for Labor Day. And, looking forward to more events as long as we're safe and use common sense, but we get folks out to enjoy this wonderful park and get outside and get some fresh air. I'd like to recognize former Mayor Bailey, former Councilmember Muscati, and the chairman of our Planning Commission, Mr. McKendrick. Thank you all for coming tonight. And with that, we'll move to the approval of the minutes from last meeting on July 27th.
Motion to approve.
As well as special call meeting, on August 12th.
Motion to approve both
Okay.
sets of minutes as presented.
Second.
It's been probably moved and seconded to approve the minutes from our previous 2 meetings. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Now we move to our discussion item this evening, a special request by Councilman Sloan Griffin to speak about annexation.
Yes, sir. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
sir.
Thank you, council. So moving forward, I know most of us have talked about in the past, wanting to annex, wanting to include, from conversations I have heard about the entire zip code. I've had several conversations in the past 2 weeks with Richland County to begin walking through that process to see what it would look like. Unfortunately, we missed the 17th deadline for this year for the November ballot. Part of that process, we could have put on the ballot that we want to annex as far as the zip code. But that would come with a vote from a 2000 resolution that was passed, that where you could actually vote on the zone or pieces of properties by us on council voting and putting it on the ballot. We have several options when it comes to that ballot. We could do the general election, like November, or we could do a special election. So we could ad hoc do a special election to look at annexation as far as what the residents of the zip code or the area that we're looking at. So part of the discussion that I want, and not to take up too much time this evening, but to get a feel from council, where do we want to start at looking at annexation? Do we want to look at it from a zip code perspective? Do we want to zero in on areas? And this is a process that, all honesty, just from some of my conversations, not to go too deep into it, but if we don't, then we take the chance in the next couple of years of Columbia actually backdooring us, which will lock us in, will become a forest acres type deal where you can't grow anymore, you're done. You have to grow within type deal. So we have the opportunity to grow in all directions. But, economically looking, I think the zip code is great, but I also think having pieces of Killian Road would be great too, since hence we don't have a millage, and we depend on business in our town. So I think that we really should start looking at that. So I'll close by just, taking that moment to see what you and other council members are thinking about when it comes to annexation.
Right. Obviously, the big goal would be the entire zip code. It just makes sense. We're all writing Blythewood on our letters and bills. People know they say they live in Blythewood, and then you've seen it just like I have at the polls. They come to vote, and they're turned away because they're told you don't live in the town. So ultimately, been in conversation with Mr. Cook. We're almost ready to proceed and just basically target areas around a more manageable geographic area, and then see the interest there. We also have staff working on all the homeowners associations around the entire zip code area, even outside of Blythewood, so that maybe you all and myself, certainly I'll go and speak to them about annexation and the benefits versus not doing it, like you just articulated here tonight, and see what they think about it, just to get a general idea before we then go forward and spend the money on a special election if necessary. Otherwise, like you said, we'll have to wait another 2 years from now for the next general election, which will be obviously not a gubernatorial, but Senate election and other general election, and we could put it on that ballot. So if we see certain areas of the Northwest and South, for instance, are very interested, but out east they're not, then we could move forward with those areas that are. And so we really won't know until we get a large group to give us their opinion. But that's the way I see it. So just reaching out to them, even if by mail, and going to their homeowners association meetings over the next 6 months or so, and get that feel and see where we go from there. But we are ready to begin that process. Any other comments? Mr. Cook, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we are embarking on a comprehensive plan rewrite currently. I'll start with the Planning Commission. It's in the works. It's initially just started, so it may be a good time as well as we continue to look at the pros and cons of annexation as the town grows or decides not to grow. There'll be opportunities for some polling, some surveying, some public meetings. So if you want to piggyback off of where we're going with a comprehensive plan for the next 18 months or so, when you move forward with your annexation, certainly would be a good opportunity there for public input at least. So, and obviously there are pros and cons to annexation. There are legal minutia related to annexation that we'll have to make sure that we're good with, and targeted annexation. Generally, we're towns and cities go, what is the benefit to the town versus the, of not doing anything or doing something.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Cook, are you saying right now with the comprehensive plan that we're working on, that annexation is not a part of it now?
So it just started out the comprehensive plan rewrite. So it'll be a 18-month process, but annexation will be part of that discussion.
And of course, it's future planning is what you're referring to. So if we were annexed all the way down Langford and Romer Pond Road to include Crick and Tree in that area, you would have a potential zoning in mind if that happens. Is that what you mean, a contingency?
Right.
Okay.
Partially, thinking of it from a planning perspective, if you decide to annex, taking into account the comprehensive plan, but also using that tool, the comprehensive plan, as we do a rewrite to gauge where the citizens want us to go or not go, and some pinpoint certain areas where we may want to go or where we may not want to go, as opposed just to all in on 29016.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll move to action items for tonight. And any citizens wishing to speak, just signal and let me know as we get to the item you'd like to speak about, and we will certainly recognize you. So we begin with number one, the second reading of ordinance 2020.001, text amendment for Chapter 35 purchasing policies. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is second reading. First reading last month received unanimous approval. It's just several amendments to Chapter 35, which is our purchasing policy for the Town of Blythewood Code. A draft copy of the amendments have been provided for your review. And again, first reading on July 27th was unanimous to approve.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
It's been probably motioned and seconded to approve the text amendment for ordinance number 2020.001. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, the motion passes. Now we'll move to the second reading of ordinance 2020.009, text amendment for Chapter 30, general provisions, remote meetings. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is the second reading of a text amendment amending sections 30.05 and adopt section 30.12 to provide for remote attendance by council members at town council meetings. First reading approval on July 27th, 2020 was 5-0 unanimous to approve in the second reading item.
Any questions about the remote meeting ordinance?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
It's been probably motioned and seconded to approve the text amendment, Chapter 30, general provisions of ordinance number 2020.009. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, motion passes. Thank you. Move to item 3 tonight, ordinance 2020.001, state of emergency ordinance. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is ordinance 2020-011, a state of emergency ordinance that we had in place previously. You required 60 days to renew this if it is your will. So we're at that point now, so it's before you again for that consideration.
Mr. Mayor, I believe it's states on the agenda 011, but actually in our packet it's 012.
Yep. The numbers are reversed.
Yep.
Okay, so the mask ordinance is 011. Okay. So let's go ahead and proceed. Ordinance 2020.012, the state of emergency ordinance.
Make a motion to approve as is.
Second.
And probably motion and second to approve ordinance 2020.012, state of emergency ordinance. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Please.
Does this prevent us from opening town hall?
No, because we voted before that the town administrator has that authority.
Okay, what does this ordinance serve then?
Text. That we are in a state of emergency, it expires within 61 days, is that correct?
Yes.
So before the 61st day, when it automatically expires, we renew it. And what it allows us to do is call emergency meetings without notification of the public to deal with the public health, among other things, but that's the main crux of it. And it also allows us to conduct town meetings by electronic means.
Mr. Meigs, wouldn't ordinance 2020.009 also allow that?
Well, it does now permanently. This is under.
So section 2 is at this point null and void.
That's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Good question.
I'm done.
So
So.
I just put the
any other
motion
fur-
on.
Yeah, I think we already have it ready. Any further discussion before we vote? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, the motion passes. Thank you. Now we'll move to ordinance 2020.001, the mask ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Barris. Same thing. This is a previous ordinance that you, council, approved, and it's getting ready to expire, and it is up for renewal if it is the will of council.
Make a motion to approve as is.
Second.
It's been probably motion and seconded to approve ordinance number 2020.001, wearing a face mask. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, motion passes. Thank you. Now we move to item 5, Greater Blythewood Chamber requests A, operation funding requests. Mr. Hasterrock. There you go.
Yes, yes, thank you. I think we're all pretty familiar with this. The Chamber is asking for reconsideration of their ATAX request to help them fund the residency at the old post office. Their original request was $5,500. They've modified their request to $4,000 for the rest of the fiscal year. I think it's September through July 1st. And Bill and Alan are here if you have questions or discussion.
I got a
Mr. George. Councilman Griffin?
question, Steve. Did this go back to ATAX committee?
It did not. It was not a new request, it was a modification of an existing request. The original request for $5,500 was approved by the ATAX committee.
Hear from Mr. George. Okay.
Before Mr. George,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
I'd like to make
please.
a statement. Since this is a recall, or recount, I want to make clear, I am a proponent of the chamber, first of all, and I believe in the chamber. And I voted just the opposite when we had the first meeting. But in listening at the mayor, he decided to put it back on the docket simply because there's supposed to be additional information. I'm curious, and I want to hear what the information is and see whether or not it's a game changer. And I want to put that on record going up front before we get started.
Okay, but I think it would be Alan and Phil that could provide you with the additional information.
Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Franklin, council members. Thank you very much for this additional time to talk about this subject. Obviously, we were disappointed with the results of the vote last month, particularly after the ATAX committee had recommended it 5-1. I am a resident of Blythewood. I live about a half a mile from here on Sandfield. I know most of you can't tell it by looking at me, but I'm a very old banker. On September 1, I will celebrate 45 years in this business, and probably should have retired long before this discussion came up. But I do appreciate the time, and I think it is relevant that I mention the age, because we've all lived through a lot, but none of us have lived through what we're living through right now, and I don't think there's any reason I would be here tonight if it wasn't for COVID. I know in our bank right here in Blythewood, we reviewed, approved, and funded about $1.5 million to local businesses in Blythewood for PPP. I can't tell you how many people have called me, emailed me, written letters to thank us for keeping them in business. That's what we're asking for. I don't want to sound dramatic, but what's happened in our situation is dramatic. And so whether or not this is a game changer, as you say it is, I would like to address the fact that some of the remarks that were made following the vote last month, I don't think I won't say they weren't accurate, but I will say they weren't in the heart and minds of our 152 members of the Chamber of Commerce when they saw the result. And to characterize the request as squandering money was actually very hurtful. The Chamber of Commerce does not squander money. We do everything that we can to support the efforts of our businesses to be successful in this community, to get together at least once a month and see everybody and find out what's going on. There's a lot of new initiatives. You talk about things being a little bit different. I don't know if it was discussed at the last meeting, but you already know some of the things that the Chamber does in this community to support its members. But one thing I don't think you know is that if there are nonprofits that want to participate in our events, whether it's the Par 3 Palooza, the Gala, Oktoberfest, those kinds of things, they can participate with no fee. In other words, if they're a food vendor and they want to come to the Rib Fest, they can do so without paying the fee. That's a benefit to the members. We are kicking off a marketing campaign. It's a cooperative effort where we can have half page in the paper for 48 weeks with 20 people represented in that, with them paying a small portion of the cost for the ad. That's a tremendous benefit to a small business that can't afford to advertise every week. And it can rotate around. They can do 48 months, they can do 1 week. And that's going to add a little bit of administrative expense to us, but it's something that we're willing to do to support our very small businesses. Joe Bernard, who's the CEO of Providence Health, I think many of you probably know Joe, great guy. He has agreed to chair a new committee for us. It's called the Industry Partners Committee, and it invites members of industry to get together, discuss what's going on in their world, get to know. The whole idea of a chamber is for everybody to get to know everybody and support one another. And that's what we'd like to continue to do the best that we can. Understand this may not be the kind of material that you were expecting, other than the fact that we reduced our request $1,500. And the fact that COVID still exists and it's still impacting the ability of our members to pay dues, which is a tremendous dip in cash flow to us. This is not a $20,000 request. It's not a $15,000 request. It's not 10, it's not even 5. And I think if you knew the benefit it would provide versus the misgivings that you might have about it, I think the benefit far outweighs a decision to turn this down once again. Thank you.
Mr. George, I have a question. First off, we talked about the PPP and all that, so, from a perspective from my world and emergency management to your world, thank you for supporting as many businesses as you could, with, you said over $1 million that you guys have loaned out through that program. So want to commend you and your bank for stepping up to the plate on that.
Thank you.
And assisting those businesses, so thank you. And, you know, nothing personal, you know, this is not personal, so I want to ask a question here. You know, we voted no last month. After that, on August the 4th, the chamber notified their members that they secured lease on the building. So the funding did not come through, but the chamber still moved forward with securing the building. By you being in the banking world, since you're there, is drawing a question to me. If I were to open a business, and I'm going to paint a perfect picture, I got perfect credit, I want to open a mechanic shop. So I go out and I lease a building. I pay the down payment to that building, but then I realize something, I don't have enough money to make it down the road. I secured it. So what would happen if I come to your establishment and put in for a loan for that to pay my rent and utilities until I can get up on my feet? What would happen if I do that coming into your establishment?
Well, first of all, that's not apples to apples. This is not a loan that we're asking for from for the chamber. So that changes the perspective of your question a little bit. But secondly, I don't think somebody's going to be able to come to the bank when they know up front that they can't afford what they're doing. And as far as us having an emergency or a special called meeting by our board, we had to make a decision before August 1st whether we were going to be in a building or not be anywhere, which would be extremely difficult to support our members and what the chamber does. If you can imagine trying to take care of everything from somebody's back porch, which is what we did for a while. And partly, we did not have the same expense while we were in that building when Susan Smith was the major tenant, and we sublet from her. So when she left, we had to make the decision, are we going to be somewhere and try to work through this over the next 4 to 5 months, or are we just going to bail? We made a unanimous decision to enter that lease, and we will honor that lease, and we'll honor all of our expenses no matter what it takes. This is asking for some help in doing that. That's all.
So you kind of answered some things for me. I know it's not apples to apples or oranges to oranges, but you answered some things for me. So I couldn't come and ask for the money. It would be a loan from your establishment.
You could ask.
But I'm not going to get it.
I don't know that. I'd have to look at your entire financial picture. Fortunately or unfortunately, our entire financial picture is before everybody in this room. And so we don't know, for example, that the accounts receivable that we have for dues is going to remain at the level that it is, which is way too high. And we don't know, the programs that we sponsor, the events that we put on, have always made money for us. We've got a golf tournament that comes up on September the 3rd. There's a good chance that we can count on another good profit from that, in spite of COVID. So then you've got the Oktoberfest, which made money for us last year. We're not going to give up on our purpose just because we're not getting $5,000 or $4,000 from the town, if that's your question.
No. So I don't expect
Are you questioning the decision we made to enter the lease?
There you go. So you entered it, so the chamber entered a lease knowing that they could not, or
No,
did not
we
have.
did not say we could not. That's just how I answered second half of your question just now. We're not saying we cannot afford the lease.
And why are you here?
We're asking for help, that's all.
I get it. And this, from professional to council position, I get it. I have seen where state agencies couldn't flip a bill, and my agency come to the rescue. I seen that. I seen vice versa. I seen where we flipped the bill for PPE for all these school districts that's coming through me. All right, it's all state agencies, PPE. I get it. I understand it. But to me, that's not financially responsible to just jump up and do that. And I know personally, if I would have made that decision, I probably would be put out of the building and moved on. But you answered the question that regardless, you guys can afford it and can move on. I have other questions, but you answered all of them, so I'm good. I yield my time back, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Councilman Brock?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm probably not going to be brief, so let's all strap in. To quote Maya Angelou, she said, "I have a great respect for the past. If you don't know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going. I have respect for the past, but I'm a person of the moment. I'm here, and I do my best to be completely centered at the place I'm at, and then go forward to the next place." Council members, before several of you walked in, I placed a healthy packet in front of you. There are several attachments and documents that I'm going to reference. Several stories here about the Chamber's past financial history, which is with the nice little binder clip. I have minute meetings from April 23rd of 2018, minutes from April 22nd of 2019, the Chamber's prior request, which I didn't give copies of that, and a statement of financial position diagram that basically outlines what the Chamber should be providing on a monthly basis to council. And I'll get into that in a little bit. I'd like to go back all the way to May 2017 and recount the Chamber's financial history moving forward. At that time, the Chamber was under the leadership of Mike Switzer. In May of 2017, the Chamber had requested $33,000 to run the Visitor Center. Now, it's also important to note that in the Chamber's prior request for $5,500, they had offered, I guess, to once again host and manage the Blythewood Visitor Center. Of that $33,000, the Chamber requested $18,000 or so was to be spent on a part-time employee. The employee was later interviewed by The Voice, stating that they were to be paid $15 an hour for 20 hours, which is approximately the $18,500 by the time you factor in FICA and other employment expenses. However, they were paid $10 an hour for a total of about $10,400. My question that I'm not looking for an answer is, where did the approximately $8,000 difference go? They also requested another $20,000 for an economic grant, which was an increase from the prior year of $15,000. $25,000 for the Visitor Center, an increase of $18,500, which they were awarded, and $12,500 for the Big Grab, which was up from $87,50. They requested an increase from the prior fiscal year of $15,250, or 36% increase. At the time, Mayor Ross was quoted as saying, I kind of get tired, and there's not many people who come in and do this. When you keep coming and asking, when you don't get to a certain number, you want more. That doesn't seem fiscally responsible to me. You have to look from within. Fast forward to January of 2018, the Visitor Center reported that was provided to council has raised additional questions. There are some members of council, for the record, that were on council at that time. time the report was given to council, it showed revenues of approximately $18,500 versus expenditures of $26,000, resulting in a deficit of approximately $7,500. In April of 2018, Executive Director Switzer stated that the chamber needed additional funds to cover nonspecific and additional costs incurred in running the visitor center. Nonspecific and additional costs is a red flag as an accountant. The Town Council approved additional funding to the Greater Blythewood Chamber of Commerce to cover the deficit addressed in January. Also in that meeting, Mayor Ross and Councilman Franklin voted no for the funding request, which is this one, this attachment here on page 3 of 4. Moving into May of 2018, The Voice, under the FOIA, requested 5 years of annual budgets and profit and loss statements from the chamber. I'm genuinely curious if that FOIA request was ever granted. If so, I would love to see the financials, starting with the most current ones going back 5 years. The second budget workshop in May of 18, Mr. Switzer was quoted as saying, Mr. Parler attended every single board meeting where our treasurer report was given out and all our financials are laid out. Mr. Ross is quoted as saying during that meeting that the town government's books are open for viewing and the chamber's books should also be. I'm curious if the chamber still provides these financials to the town. It's worth noting that also at this meeting that former Councilman Tommy Troska pointed out the town council had done very little at the time to hold the chamber accountable for the public funds they had received. At that time, the town council gave the Greater Blythewood Chamber of Commerce until June 12th to get their financials in order and present them to town hall. In June of 18, council increased the funding for the chamber from the economic grant of $15,000 to $17,000 and $10,000 for the big grab versus the $8,500 previously allotted. They also approved the $18,500 for the temporary employee, I presume, another increase of $4,000. The only thing that the town asked for during that increase of $4,000 was a $2,500 premier sponsorship and a voting seat on the board. At this point, instead of getting a premier or elite sponsorship for the monies that the town is investing in the chamber, we're actually paying $3,500 for that sponsorship. We've kind of flipped the switch there. Let's see, moving forward. In regards to the profit and loss statements provided, Mr. Parler said the chamber's profit and loss statements were difficult to understand. At some point during the meeting, Councilman Gorge and Griffin, Mr. Larry Griffin, suggested pulling the plug on the chamber funding immediately, but council later decided to fund it through the end of the year, which is, when was that? December 31st of 2018, when you pulled the plug on the visitor center? Moving forward, the question of the visitor center, I'm sorry, I have shorthand, usefulness was addressed by Councilman Ballman. As he stated, he viewed the visitor center record for the first half of 2018 and only 67 names were present, of which half were from Blythewood. Well, if you take 18,500 divided by 2, it's 9,250 for approximately 30 visitors. It's pretty expensive. Council voted unanimously to stop the funding for the visitor center effective 12/31/2018. Now, fast forward to 2019, July, a CPA reviews the chamber's fiscal year 2017-2018 financials and finds them, and I quote, confusing, lacking in detail, and sometimes impossible to follow and understand. It's concluded that much of the $18,000 was not used for an employee, but funneled directly into the chamber's annual operating expenses, which is an unauthorized use of ATAX money. It's also worth noting that council never granted the use of ATAX money for operating expenses. Former Councilman Bob Massa, CPA, and he also happened to be the former treasurer of the Greater Blythewood of Commerce, noted that some of the chamber's operating expenses charged to the visitor center appeared to be inflated, thus inflating the deficit of $7,600, which was addressed in January of 18 and funded in April of 2018. Mr. Massa said, council has a fiduciary responsibility to the residents. ATAX money is for specific things. It is not for funding the chamber's operating expenses, but it would appear that it's being laundered through the visitor center to do just that. There was also a $17,500 grant that was allocated to the chamber. A state official also had concerns about this economic development grant. Council awards each year to the Greater Blythewood Chamber of Commerce, a practice Mr. Massa said should be frowned upon by the residents since it does not appear to meet the criteria for the grant. There were also discrepancies in the big grab revenues versus expenditures and the solar eclipse event. Mr. Massa was also quoted as saying the chamber needs to explain these discrepancies. My question for council is, were these discrepancies ever explained? Moving into 2019, the town funds Oktoberfest. Full disclosure, I actually very much enjoy Oktoberfest. I think it's a great event, and I think it will be very successful moving forward. But it is worth noting that the chamber has received $14,000 from the first Oktoberfest with a projected profit of $21,125. Mr. Ross is quoted as saying, in response to Councilman Utroska's criticism of council voting unanimously to award Chamber the $14,000 for an event that is expected to raise $21,000, Mr. Ross is quoted as saying, "We got that 48 hours before our meeting. We sat up here looking at that for the first time, and they needed approval for some of the vendors, performers, etc., and I think we rushed through that. But this event is not until the 2019-2020 budget approval, so we may have to revisit that. For an organization to have a $21,000 profit, that's great, but maybe they don't need the money." In March of 2019, questions at council's retreat concerning the lack of resolution with the chamber and their financials. Town council was informed that an audit by the town's auditor, Love Bailey, was being done on the chamber financials statements. It's worth noting that it was not a management audit, but simply a review of the financial statements. Fast forward to April of 2019, the chamber comes clean, and they admit that they don't have a working budget or even a draft budget. At this meeting, chamber withdrew, which was a wise move in my opinion, a funding request of $20,500, $17,000 for the Economic Development Work Subsidy, formerly known as the grant, and $3,500 for the Elite Partnership. Mr. Ballman is quoted as saying during this meeting, "Do you have a working budget at the time?" You said you do not. You do not even have a draft of your budget. We want to see a hard copy of your budget and how the funds requested by the chamber are spent. We've asked for financials in the past and haven't gotten them. We would like to see monthly financials from the chamber. Personally, I do not think that is too much to ask with the hundreds of thousands of dollars that the chamber has received over the past 5 years from the town. Moving along. Also, in May of 19, at some point between April and May, Mr. Switzer resigned, and it was revealed that the chamber was $22,000 in the negative. Shored up, the Greater Blythewood Chamber of Commerce got itself a $20,000 line of credit as it could no longer rely on the excessive funding from town council. They did exactly what any other business would do. They went to a bank and they got a loan to survive. They didn't come to the town then, and they shouldn't be coming to the town now. I only have a few more. Worth noting that at a later meeting in May of 2019, Mayor Ross was quoted as saying that you were down $22,000 in reaction to interim chamber director Phil Fry withdrawing the $17,500 request from the town's general fund. How can you not ask for the grant? You've overspent, it looks like, and now you don't need our money? Question mark. I guess this is the fiscal responsibility we've been talking about over and over and over. Town Attorney Jim Meggs made it clear where council should be standing on the issues of funding for the chamber. You're not a bank, Mr. Meggs said to Mr. Ross. Anything you do with public money has to go to a lawful public purpose. Being a bailout source is not an appropriate public purpose. And furthermore, Mr. Parler added in this meeting that the chamber board voted unanimously against coming to council for a bailout. And here we are. That, in a nutshell, is the financial history of the chamber. So my first question for you, Mr. George, you sublet from a CPA, who I believe was named Small Business of the Year from the chamber. You also stated that the entire financial picture of the chamber is before everyone, yet I see no reports in front of me. Where are these monthly reports that have been requested time and time again by our fellow council members? Where is this entire financial picture that's supposed to be in front of everyone? If you were $22,000 in the red, and now you're $5,500, $4,000, some number in the red, because I don't know, because there are no financials sitting in front of us, how is now any different than it was in July, or whenever it was, earlier this year, or last year rather, spring of 2019, when it seems to me that you're essentially asking for a bailout, a smaller bailout, but a bailout nonetheless, which our town attorney has said we can't do.
You've made your point.
It's not personal. I just don't think
Didn't
it's
say
right.
it was.
I just don't think it's right, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Mayor, I do want to
Go ahead, please.
I do want to add something just for the general public view of it. The emails that we have received since making this vote last month, I get it, I understand it, but I do want to go on the record and say this, the businesses in Blythewood I personally go to. I personally come back here and eat lunch here. All the time. We make it our best to come back here. So, some of the emails that I received about, you don't support small business, that's baloney. You don't support businesses in Blythewood, that's baloney. I'll show you my receipts. I don't have a problem with that. TD Bank keeps a good record. I can pull that. But I do want to go on the record, to state that, myself, and my family, we make sure we come back to Blythewood and spend our money. That's all. Thank you, sir.
Other comments? Mr. Fry, please.
Pretty obvious that there's a passion involved. And history is history. From the Dark Ages, biblical times, whatever you believe in. The sad part is if we wipe out history and don't learn from it, we lost because we're going to repeat it. Councilman, I appreciate your passion in doing your homework. And I'll tell you that I'm equally as passionate. I wasn't born in Blythewood. I've only been here 18 years. My wife's family has deep roots here. The water tower that was there, her grandfather was foreman on the crew. She asked me, why do I get involved? And I told her that. No, I wasn't born here, but your family was. And further to that effect, I grew up in Irmo. Population was 358. And when I was able to get a car, I drove through Blythewood. I saw Destowe. I saw everything that was here. It was very much like Irmo when I was growing up. We have this tiny, tiny, tiny window here in Blythewood to not become Irmo. I resort to that effect because my wife said to me 10 years ago, everybody's moving in on top of us. We might as well go ahead and move to Fairfield County. I said, no, might as well go into the mountains because it's coming anyway. What can we do to fix that? What can we do to make Blythewood not become Irmo? Whether that's annexation, if it's going to Killian Road, if it's going to Broad River, or wherever it's going to. That's irrelevant. It is incumbent upon us as leaders of this town to manage properly. And I think it's on the record where I stood and where I still stand in regards to the past financials of this organization. And to the point, it was inferred that the chamber went to get a $20,000 line of credit when they realized they were $22,000 in debt. Well, that $20,000 line of credit was in place when I stepped on board. And when I stepped on board is when we found out where we were going to be to that deficit. Our line of credit stands at $4,700 today. In less than 1 year's time, even with COVID, we succeeded in doing that. We've installed austerity measures. And again, whatever happened in the past is happened in the past. I can say as far as the visitor center is concerned, the chamber didn't ask for that way back when. The chamber was asked to take the visitor center. Rightly, wrongly, indifferent. And whatever method they went to go about it, it is. I can tell you that today, our involvement as far as the visitor center, yeah, there's visitors materials in our offices. In December of 18, I believe that's the date, 12/31 of 18, it was to be moved to Town Hall. Those racks and all were delivered over there. There's products over there now. We facilitated everything that's ever been asked for us. We facilitated the Visitor's Guide last year. I think it's been very successful. To the point that last month, we got another request from the Welcome Centers to produce a Visitor's Guide. And I can tell you in the last 3 weeks, I've had 6 calls asking for people that are relocating here. Did I come to town and ask them for the visitor's guides? No, I gave them what we had. To the point, we have gone to, and our board this past year, we considered because we were running a little bit low on visitor's guides, should we go for a reprint? The vote was absolutely not. We're not going to go ask these businesses to spend more money on advertising. We will table that to 2021. The question came up, well, what do we do now? Here we are. I have less than 100 copies of it. I've checked with the town. They have just about as many as we. If I get another request for 200, can I fulfill them? No. We go back to the publisher. We say, is there a reprint? What is the cost? Make minor changes. We're able to get it done. That's going to happen. And we're going to facilitate that because we believe in Blythewood. There is too much exponential potential for this town to be the model of the Central Midlands, not be pigeonholed like Forest Acres. I welcome the challenge. And yes, we are kicking off a marketing campaign. Age-old questions. When I stepped into it, what does the chamber do for me? What do I get out of it? Standard pat answer is, what do you put into it? That goes with any organization. Well, we're going a step further. I believe in giving back and giving back and giving back because the dividends come down the road. And if we do the right thing today, support our businesses, which is what it's all there for. One of the other councilmen referred to, and previous conversation about annexation. There's no millage. We depend on the businesses. That's where this A-tax money comes from. H-tax money. It comes from these businesses. There is no. And if we don't support our businesses in a meaningful way, when I say marketing campaign, one where we share with the business that they see a tangible effort. And to, as he alluded to before, every nonprofit, we offer space because we believe in it. It's down the road, but another nonprofit is going to be handling a portion of the Oktoberfest, assuming that is approved. That support their business, their function. To the point that Small Business Person of the Year, if you want to see the ballots, I'll show them to you. That comes from the membership. They vote.
Mr. Fry, I wasn't questioning whether or not.
It's a relative. We have records. You want them? You can see them. Here's our monthly board report financials. Have been since day one, since I got there. We asked for a one-time $4,000 Band-Aid of something that we did not see forthcoming. We were the first ones in budget meetings to present our budget moving forward for this coming year. And I believe in what I'm hearing, that there's going to be, in future years, no, all of a sudden in the back end. I'm a proactive person, and I'm going to remain that way. In this chamber, God willing, we'll move forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Council member comments before I speak?
I got a few, if you
Please,
don't mind.
Councilman Ballman.
Bill, thank you for that, and Alan, thank you very much for what you had to say. And I appreciate Councilman Brock pointing out some of these things we said years ago, which brings to mind the very last page where Fry assured council that the Greater Chamber of Commerce would be more transparent with its financials in the future. And I think you've done a great job doing that. I think this request is appropriate. I think it's no different than us appropriating money to pay for a part-time employee over at the museum. I don't see it as any difference of us approving a virtual meeting, which I think was very much appropriate, that was not going to bring anybody into town, and financing that for them for the virtual film festival, which will, like I said, it's going to be virtual, which I felt very strongly about passing that. I think it's the right thing to do. I think the way the chamber supports our small businesses, if they're going to put ads in the papers for 48 weeks, some of these businesses can't afford them. We all try to support our businesses here in Blythewood. And we see when you have the chamber breakfasts on the Tuesday mornings, how the networking goes and trying to help our businesses. So I think this is a minimal request. I think it's appropriate. I think it shows our support for our Greater Blythewood Chamber of Commerce. I see governments all around the state doling out thousands of dollars to businesses just like this. So I see it as a win-win for the town and the chamber and our small businesses. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Mr. Chairman, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Rich McKenrick, 495 Hollyberry Circle, Blythewood, South Carolina. I spoke last month in opposition to the funding, and I'll go back to Griff Griffin's question at the very beginning. Nothing has changed from the first request to today other than the amount of the request. So I have a couple questions and then 2 points and I'll be done. A-tax, H-tax. If somebody turns in an application, and Mr. Mayor, you know, I've had several conversations with you about just how very loose our criteria is with A-tax, H-tax. Who gets what? Who applies for what criteria? How many years is somebody going to request? This brings up another question for A-tax, H-tax criteria, in that if I turn in an application, I go through the application process and come here and passionately present my application. and town council sits where you're sitting, you have a discussion and you vote, and it is declined. Without A-tax and H-tax meeting again as a committee, which operates at the will of the council, that application can be tweaked by a dollar amount and brought back before you without A-tax and H-tax recommending it be done.
To a lesser number, yes, sir, not a
Okay,
higher
so
number.
follow me down this road. Why didn't they ask for $20,000? You vote no. They lower it to 15. You vote no. They lower it to 10. You vote no. They lower it to 5. You vote, all without going back before A-tax and H-tax committee, which is a committee that council set up to do the work, do the investigating work. That makes absolutely zero sense.
Well, if they approve 20 and they come back and ask for 10, there's
If
nothing
you-
wrong with that.
If you turn them
Because
down.
they already recommended 20 from the, I'm talking about the committee you're referring to.
But the committee makes only one recommendation.
Yeah, and if they say 20,000 and it's turned down and
Yep.
the organization comes back for 10.
Yep.
Well, the committee's already approved them for 20, so it's a moot point for them to go back.
But then they can appear on your agenda month after month after month without going back through your A-tax, H-tax.
If we put them on the agenda, and like I said in opening comments, this was supposed to be materially different with different information. The council member asked me, I told him the answer.
Yes, sir, which goes back to my earlier point. Other than the dollar amount, it's not material different. Second question is, if I buy a home and I go get a mortgage, and I don't have a job to pay for that mortgage, how does that work? You voted no to, I believe it was $5,400. And in very short time frame, they signed the lease, committing the chamber to pay rent that they can't afford, and they said they can't afford it. And again, I am not anti-chamber, I'm pro-chamber. I'm pro-small business, my wife owns one. But I also sit down at the table with her as she's doing her budget for her business, and we figure out how we're paying rent. By merchandise sold, by hours open, by how many hours she's working as opposing to paying another employee to be there and working. Apply logic to this, and it's very easy. You can't sign a lease committing yourselves to $4,400 and say, oh, don't worry, I'm going to get it back on the agenda and we're going to go at it again. Last month, after I spoke and I told the chamber it wasn't personal, I stood in this hallway and I told Phil Fry and Ed Parler that it wasn't personal, because prior to me coming and speaking last month, I had raised $1,200 for the chamber to go toward that money they were requesting that I hoped you would vote no on. I told them to call me. Now, these are non-chamber members who understood what the chamber was up against. I've not gotten a phone call. And since the articles were running in the paper that were somewhat partisan, one person called me and said, this is a political fight that I'm not willing to get in, so he withdrew his $400. So, again, I've not gotten a phone call. I saw Phil, we spoke, but he didn't question me about the money that I personally raised on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. Because it's easier to come here, stand behind this podium, and say, give me $4,000. It's less than I asked for last time. Guys, amazing. Last question. They like to be across the street from the Historical Society. They like to be in close proximity to town council because it's the Chamber of Commerce. If there's a building next door to them that is sublet, that has advertised that they would sublet an office, when my wife was in that building, that advertisement's there. All they need is an office. So a question I would have is, how much effort have they put forward to find an office? Not operating on somebody's deck, under an umbrella, in a basement, in a closet, one office. Rather than, again, going from being the one who was subletting from somebody, now you've got the whole building. Last month, they were promoting Bravo, Blythewood, and the Artists Guild sharing the space. Tonight, we didn't hear anything about that. It's just, if you're going to move the target, you got to keep everybody in the same loop. So no information has changed other than the fact that the amount is less. And still, A tax, H tax, I would trust that committee to do the job. They should have went back through the whole cycle again versus changing the dollar amount. And again, I understand how it got put on the agenda. You thought there was additional information. I would just question whether what they did tonight was give you additional information. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor, one final comment. Since it has been asked for in the past, and it has, I believe, been offered up, moving forward, I would like to formally request that the chamber submit a statement of position, which I gave everyone a handout, which kind of summarizes how you do it. It's basically assets minus liabilities equals net assets. Pretty simple. To provide a monthly snapshot for council so we can see their financial position. It doesn't prevent anyone from walking up to that podium and saying, hey, I'm having a hard time, can you give me X amount of dollars?
Right, but that information exists. I see it on a monthly basis. Whenever I go to the breakfast meetings like you attended before, they usually have a budget report. Some weeks they skip it, but it comes out.
It should be
Mr. Parler.
here.
Can I say something about the agenda here, A tax, H tax? As when I was in there as a visitor center, I was part of the co-work station. And I was led to believe that, you know, it was going to benefit me as less than 1% of being a Black American business owner. And while I was actually at the co-work station, my business was filed as fraud and shut down, just for the record so you can know. So now I am unable to file for, to go to the banks and file for anything because of the misorganization under the hands of Phil Fry and at that time Mayor Ross. And I know it sounds bad, but this was brought to my attention. And when I did go to Mr. Fry, he said submit a proposal, and this is what was submitted. Roxanne Hennigan is pleased to present this proposal for your review. Arthur House published Roxanne Hennigan. Look forward to partnering with the community to provide ABC, a balanced child workbook, to the families that has lost loved ones during this COVID-19 era. There have been 1,085 lives lost in South Carolina, according to DHEC, as of today. That was earlier in the month. Bill Fry asked me to submit this information. I never heard anything back from him. Because as you know, last month earlier, I came to City Council asking for a certain dollar amount to be placed in the new visitor center, which is the town hall, correct? And so I'm asking that with that, my book will be placed in the town hall based on Phil Fry not responding to me via email. And I submitted it to him, and I don't know what happened and why I didn't get a response. But as a disabled American veteran, all I have now is this book. And I do want to thank Eddie Bowman for that prayer on Tell You on Purple Heart Day. I didn't know you could pray like that. I mean, that was really good, and I appreciate the mayor and everyone that was there and participated. And Larry Griffin for mentioning the at Bethel Hanbury School on Facebook. But yeah, that prayer was something else, and it really does bring the community together. But my thing is, if you want to move forward, Phil Fry, and you cannot even respond to something that you asked me to, and then you have a city councilman, Brock, presenting all the information since August of 2017, and the money that was in the red, $23,000, and I've seen the people that came through there and printed out checks. Why would the city council approve the $4,000 or even $1,500, and I'm less than 1% in the community, and I'm not nowhere on your record. Did a lot for this community. You couldn't show me anything when I met with you. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Parler.
As Mr. Brock noted, you know, the change that in the relationship between the chamber in the past and currently, where there was no longer that economic development grant, which we withdrew, knowing that, you know, the consequences of where we would have to make up that money from, you know, from memberships, et cetera. But generously, the town has agreed to be a premier sponsor. And as such, also, you know, in doing such, requested and was approved that it has a standing member on the board. I am your member I represent the town on the board of the chamber. I will happily share with you or anyone, you know, on council or Brian or whomever, you know, those financials as soon as they're approved, you know, each month. Happily drop it, you know, to keep you, you know, to keep you abreast.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments?
Comment.
Yes, please, Councilman.
So I just want to go back on Ms. Roxanne Hennigan there. So, you know, you reached out to me about the book in the visitor center. So I did reach back out to the mayor and Mr. Cook. So you can put your book in the visitor center. Just be aware, you know, we're still under the COVID-19 where, you know, visitors and things are limited. So, you know, once we get back up to that level where visitors are in and out, please get with Mr. Cook and, you know, go through the process to have your book displayed. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you all. I'll just speak, not in rebuttal to anything that's been said tonight, but, you know, the fun part of politics is when you see the facts, you can spin them the way you want them to sound. And I just wanted to clarify the record from my perspective. You budget what you believe in. Mr. McKendrick's basically saying that. Your family does it, your business ought to do it, this government does it. What you fund is what your values are. So in this town, we fund ads in our newspapers to stimulate business during COVID-19 because we believe in our businesses, and many of our neighbors own them. We fund our museum because we appreciate the history and we want to keep it alive for our children to be able to see it. We fund Purple Heart Day ceremonies for veterans. We fund Christmas parades because our citizens enjoy them. We fund Big Red Barn Retreat concerts, which donate money to disabled veterans suffering from PTSD and other ailments. We fund cultural celebrations like Native American History Month and African American History Month because diversity is important to this body. We fund the arts, Delco Film Festival, farmers markets, the Artists Guild. We fund women's golf, professional golf tournaments, because not only are we helping to promote young women and future careers, hopefully, but our citizens like to go participate and watch those sporting events. We fund rodeo because it's part of the heritage of many folks around here who are equestrians and ride horses. We fund Oktoberfest for German American history celebration, and because people like to get out and have a German beer every now and then. We fund our kids softball, baseball, band competitions, golf, diamond invitationals, other sporting events, because we believe in our kids, and our kids are the future of our community. So when we look at the chamber, and I've heard it tonight 3 or 4 times, the chamber is not an ordinary business. We're drawing false comparisons when we say that. We can't say, if I had a business and I go get a loan, that is a false comparison. If your business wants to come and run an Oktoberfest and ask for H-Tax, A-Tax money, then fill an application out and do it. Because this chamber runs more events for this town, and I said it before and I'll say it again, than any other nonprofit does. We have funded these events I spoke of a moment ago because that's what our values are. But if we didn't send a dime, every one of these events would happen. So when I hear, oh, they're making money, they'll make $21,000 if we give them 15. Okay, as long as they account for it, and I'm going to get to that, that's okay, because then they can fund a bigger event or 2 events next year, because it's all about the citizens. When you see this Rib Fest happen, or this Oktoberfest, just name a couple, or the Christmas parade, and you see all those citizens come out and partake in it, it just doesn't automatically happen. All those members of the board of the Chamber of Commerce, are out in there volunteering their time to park cars, to help people, to marshal kids around, and to make the event special for our citizens. They're not making money off of that per se, individual business-wise, the nonprofit chamber itself will, but then I expect them to fund more events in the future and keep up with that account money. One of my colleagues spoke tonight, and I don't know if he was trying to draw a comparison, that there were many of us who were on the board with, when Mike Ross was the mayor. And when, indeed, we did vote no for funding the chamber. Because right when we found out there was mismanagement of funds, we immediately brought up the fact that we're going to stop funding them until they get their books in order. One member of this council was previously on the council when we took this vote and recommended we do it immediately, but I said no because there are 2 employees that work for that chamber. So you would say no right now, and they would be out of a job tomorrow just like that. So I wanted to be professional about it, so I recommended we fund it until December 31st to give those individuals time to find new employment. Why did I do that? Because it's the right thing to do. They resubmitted, the chamber was told you have to resubmit your books. They drug their feet over and over. We all know that. We've all read it in the paper. That's all fact. But the executive director resigned. The board turned over. So now there are all new people there. And so far, what I've seen is nothing but professionalism and the utmost there. I understand hard times hit, and you're trying to compare again, well, you're not giving money to all businesses, you're just giving it to the chamber. But again, the chamber is not a business. It's a nonprofit that supports this community in a large part, pretty much all the big things we do, with the exception of Historical Society and a couple other nonprofits. So I don't want to draw that false comparison. I don't want to read it in the paper because that's not the fact. The nonprofit that supports this community more than any other in this part and during our big events is the Chamber of Commerce. So having said that, do I want to approve money for somebody who's mismanaging the budget? Absolutely not, and I won't do that. But I haven't seen that here. I saw it 3 years ago, like one of my colleagues spoke about. That's water under the bridge. If we go to a bank to get a car loan, us few council members here, and they look at our credit from when we were 18 years old, we'd never drive a car. So even your credit rating expires in 7 years. They don't go back your entire life. So you can't compare that either. This is a brand-new board, a brand-new executive director, and they've done well so far, in my humble opinion. I've seen their finances, and didn't know that you all weren't getting it, but we will certainly make sure you get a copy of that. And then we don't put the onus on the chamber unless we're going to do that for every organization that takes money from this town.
We absolutely should, Mr. Mayor.
Which I don't mind doing. So I don't want it to seem like they're under the magnifying glass again during that. So you're talking, yes, money is fungible, and yes, they get money, and nonprofits can spend some on salaries, some on facilities, and some on the programs that they're designed to sponsor. But they should be delegated in a budget. I agree with that, 100%, and they need to show that. As far as paying sponsorship goes, we pay sponsorships to the Blythewood Little League, we pay them at Blythewood High School, and we pay them at the chamber. We're sponsors at all the concerts. So again, our money's going where our values lie. If we want to change those values and not support, then we need to look at the whole list. But what you fund is what you believe in. And then lastly, I appreciate the passion. I really do. These are not easy decisions, and not everybody's going to be happy after the decisions are made, certainly. But again, I was told it was going to be a material change, because we don't want to do it again, because there are Robert's Rules of Orders and how you change your decisions. If you make a decision at a meeting and you want to change it at the end, you have to have a motion to reconsider. If you pass a ordinance or a rule in the past, a former meeting, you have to make a motion to rescind that action, and then and it has to be a member of the majority who voted on that rule. So in other words, it's tough to do, but it is legal to do and it's possible to do. Just to answer your question earlier, one of you council members asked that. So, having said that, again, he's said he's not against business. I'm not necessarily for all businesses. I just see what the chamber does. And to me, if we're going to give, $15,000 here, $20,000 here, we're going to fund a Christmas parade for a nonprofit church group whom I'm quite sure could do it on their own, but we believe in those things. So I stand in support of the chamber. And again, any audit, if any citizen, it's a nonprofit, I'm sure they can show you their books. And that's all I have. Any other questions, council members?
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to,
Okay?
okay? I wanted to wait until you spoke to get your viewpoint. As at the first meeting that we had, I sat and listened, and I made a conscientious decision on which way I was going to go. And tonight I'm going to do the same thing, but there's a couple of questions I need answered, and that's going to help me make a decision. First of all, in Mr. Ross, ex-Mayor Ross's letter, he stated that, and you also made mention about the employee at the Historical Society that we're paying for. I'm going to ask town administrator, is the money that we're asking for and that employee, are those apples to apples?
The chamber employee?
No, the Historical Society employee and the money that the chamber is asking for, is that apples to apples?
No,
Why not?
because the museum is operating under a section of State Code 6410 that specifically talks about a museum and their function and their ability. If we're talking about ATAX, ATAX and HTAX are different, but if we're talking about bringing in tourism and tourist-related expenditures under state law, there's fine minutia between that. If the chamber was operating, say, as a cultural facility, which one could argue, bringing in the events that Oktoberfest and other events operate in that regard, there is potential for some of that ATAX money, basically the way it's broken down under state law. So it's close, and you can make the argument, depending on what facets of the chamber you look at, that it is very similar to, but it's not the same.
Okay. My question here is well, first of all, is this considered a bailout?
That's a question for Mr. Meggs.
Well,
No,
we're
it's a
discussing
political
it, so
question.
I want to know, is this a bailout?
It's not a legal question, it's a political question. No, I mean, I don't see it as a bailout, because, I mean, they could shift funds around from they could cut one event shorter and not spend as much money next year. But, they can also take their ball and go home. If we don't show support, somebody else needs to step up and do these events.
Okay, so we're not considering this a bailout?
I'm not. Those were not my words.
No, and I'll add to that, Councilman, that I believe that when they did the Rib Fest last time and they took portions of the profits and gave to 2 charities in town, which, would have been operating expenses had they not given that money to charity. So, they gave over $6,000 away. I just see this as a way to help them fund and to support these other charities again once they put these events on.
Which leads to my questioning. I'm trying to take out the fact that this is the chamber and just handle it from a business perspective. And if I take out that it's the chamber that we're talking about, let's just remove that. And that's why I want to know if it's a bailout, one, and if you're not looking at it as a bailout, because based on what Mr. Meggs says, then we can't use those funds for that. Well, if we're not considering a bailout, then that is a moot point. Mr. Cook, there are over 20 agencies that are nonprofit in the chamber. If we make a decision like this, can all of these organizations, are they deserving of the same thing?
They could potentially all apply for the same thing based under state law. They'd have certain criteria they would have to meet. A chamber is very unique, and it is called out specifically under state law. That's potentially a 30% of the ATAX that a city or town collects, if the chamber has an ongoing tourist promotion program and certain other criteria. Another pot of money, if you will, still under H-Tax, just how it should be spent. Gives certain ways that it has to operate. Promotion of the arts and cultural events, for example, is one of the criteria that you could send money for. Ads or promotion to develop and increase in tourist attendance through publicity, like the visitor center guide that the chamber does in concert with the town, one could argue. There are other criteria that could fit in there. You know, visitors information centers is, you know, that's a blast from the past, but that's why that was in there before, because, you know, it's one of the 6 or 7 or 8 that meets under state law. So it depends on what they're doing and how they're operating, basically.
Okay, Mr. Hasselrod. When your committee made the decision, what was the thought process?
What was the thought process?
Yes, sir.
Discussion, did they discuss it, debate it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, all the items are discussed. And, you know, I reviewed some of the ATAX rules on what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And if you look at section 6.4.5, in the state law, as Mr. Cook has alluded to, number 3, tourism-related expenditures include construction, maintenance, and operations of facilities for civic and cultural activities. So, in my opinion, it's in these statutes that it is permissible to use SAT money for the purpose that the chamber is asking for tonight. And these would be some of the issues, some of the things that the ATAX committee would have discussed when they made the decision to fund a request.
Okay, so based on what I'm hearing is, irregardless of the situation, based on the statute, they would be entitled to the money for rent as operational.
Yes, that's the way I understand it. Again, tourism-related expenditures, construction, maintenance, and operations of facilities for civic and cultural activities. And that's part of what our chamber does, among other things, too. They're also entitled to other pieces of the money, especially the 30%, if they have a defined marketing and promotional program that markets Blythewood. That's also an allowed expense under ATAX. Okay. And as Mr. Cook said, they are also developing these activities, which are civic and cultural activities. That's part of their mission, and that's also a legitimate expense, an expense that SAT money can be used. The whole purpose of SAT money is to promote tourism in the town, and that's what RibFest does, Oktoberfest, and some of the other things that the chamber does. So, in my humble opinion, what they're asking for is it's one of the things that the state statute says you can use and should use with SAT money.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
question for you is, now I'm going back to the chamber. Are we taking the position that we're looking to pay rent for businesses, since it's not a bailout?
I don't like the term bailout. I don't think that's the case at all. Operational expenses include your rent and electric and water and sewer, and yes, I understand that. But no, it's the organization that is probably funded the highest, that does the most for this community. So if they tell me they need $4,000, well, then guess what? We can also talk to them offline, because they're nice people. You can go talk to them and say, hey, how about when you make $10,000 on the next Oktoberfest, you save some of that money right now. Don't give it all away to charity, because next year, you know, we want to fund other things. And then the seed money that we've talked about for the past year, which we're getting ready to do with the policy, and the chairman of the planning commission is gonna help us with that. But, and that way you'll know, you're starting the seed money, and if they're making, and I don't wanna call it a profit, what's the correct term? Revenue over expenses,
It's a profit.
then maybe, we don't let them come back. I mean, county does it a different way. When you put a request into Richland County, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cook, they only give you 50% of what you asked for right off the bat. They fund you at, Mr. Hasselrock, is that right? Age tax, well, right, I'm just saying, they have a policy that is very clear. So you have to show them how you're coming up with the other 50% to fund your event, and they'll match it. Is basically what they
Potentially.
do. So what I'm saying is, if that's what we want our policy to be, we just need to make that happen. Yeah,
Mr.
go
Mayor,
ahead.
that's an interesting point. I also handed you guys, and again, I'm not trying to kick the chamber when you guys are down, but I do want to ask a question that I feel like we probably should have been asking for years. Last night, I spent about an hour and a half on your website, and this information is on a single sheet in front of you guys. And I looked at the in-town versus out-of-town members of the chamber. If there are members that are, it's about 40 or so categories, it's quite extensive. There's repetition, but I placed, based on the address that was given, the ones that were in the town limits and the ones that are out of town. And if there was a question of whether they were in or were out, I put them in the town. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I calculated 142 members based on what I could find on the website. That may be low. And the breakdown was 59 in town, 83 out of town, 4258. But let's just say there's a margin of error of 3%. So it could be 60-40, could be 55-45. Historically, the chamber has come to Blythewood for 100% of public funds that they have received. However, a majority of their clientele or membership resides outside the town of Blythewood. My question is, why has the chamber never gone to Richland County to request funds? Why have you never gone to Lexington County? Why have you never gone to Fairfield County to request funds? You have members in those municipalities. I think it's a fair question to ask. Like, I don't feel like it can always be the town of Blythewood. If you've got events in the town, sure. Oktoberfest, yes. Ribfest, yes. No problem. But, and my numbers could be wrong. It could be 50-50, it could be 55-45 the other way. I don't know. I only went off what information was available last night at 10:30. So it just seems to me that the chamber should, and quite frankly, all nonprofits, quite frankly, should look for other revenue sources other than constantly coming back to the town when they need something. And like Mr. Mayor said, don't give all your money away to charities. Save some in retained earnings so that you can roll over to the next year, so that you can keep the lights on, keep the doors open, keep the air conditioning going, because it gets hot in July and August. You know, let's be a little more fiscally responsible. That word came up several times in prior council meetings. Well, that's a word that needs to be adhered to and remembered moving forward. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
in closing out, now both sides have put up compelling arguments. I see both sides as to what you're saying. The determining factor is looming is that what is proper and what is not proper. And that's where the decision is going to be made. I do believe in, Councilman Brock had brought up about this breakdown. I agree with you from the standpoint of that if we're going to do it with the chamber, we had this conversation before, that if we're going to do it for the chamber, we need to do it for everybody across the board. I know that we're looking at changing some things later in the year to make sure that we get all the budgeting and stuff straight at one time. And I do understand that we're at this junction now with the chamber where the old rule is still in effect. Now, I'm going to go back to you for my last question. My last question is again, well, to the administrator, your answer to my question was, does everybody apply under this? That's NA tax.
everybody apply under,
If they make a request for money, such as this, does all apply?
I mean, they could if they meet the criteria. I mean, there's certain criteria under state law, but if they check that box, they can go before our A-tax committee at the town and then come before you.
Okay, so I understand, and one of the things that I want to make clear today is that because a committee makes a decision, does not mean that we rubber stamp it.
That's right, absolutely.
And if that's the case, there's no need for us to be here. If the committee that's why I wanted to know what Mr. Hasselrock and his committee's thought process was when they made the decision, because I know what mine was when I made the decision. And to be honest with you, I think you guys made more of a compelling argument for the chamber than the chamber did. With the information that you brought. Because the other information was basically the same. So you guys have made a compelling argument for the chamber. But my question to you was, this is not a situation where we're putting ourselves in position as a council to pay in rent across the board. That's what I need to know.
I do not, again, money is fungible. If your budget for your business is $1 million, you got to pay salary, you got to pay insurance, you got to pay payroll tax, you got to pay electric bill, facilities. So to me, it's all the same. That's like saying, let's give them $11,000 for the Rib Fest, but hold back $4,000 for the rent and utilities. And just give them $15,000 and let them put it in their budget and have line items for each expenditure. So I don't see it that way. I see it exactly like Mr. Hasselrock read it out of state law, the code, that money can be, they can request money for operations and maintenance and facilities.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Do we need a break?
After the vote, sir.
Do we have a motion before us
I'll
today?
make a motion to approve the request as presented.
I'll second it.
It's been properly motioned and seconded to approve the operational funding request from the Greater Blythewood Chamber of Commerce. Any further discussion?
Roll call, please, sir.
We'll call the vote. Please take roll. Mrs. Cowan? Yes.
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 No.
No.
The ayes have it. The motion passes. Thank you. Let's move to Part B, Oktoberfest 2020.
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
could I request a 5-minute recess for a bathroom break?
Let's do that. Let's reconvene in 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Sorry.
Oh, Lord.
I want to see your Super Bowl ring. Oh, Super Bowl. What is that? Company ring for
$300,000 club.
that's production. That don't necessarily mean cash.
Very nice. But you're going to the Super Bowl.
No, man, I can't get no Super Bowl.
From a citizen standpoint?
Yeah, he's gonna include you in right here. So we're right here now. That's gonna be
Pause
did you win the vote today? It's kind of like a judge kind of says sometimes. Sometimes the judge says, you don't know when you won. So stop talking and go home and relax and enjoy the win.
They don't. I thought you'd go to the breakfast with them.
I'm not gonna say shame on you, you're the smart king. Yeah, but I didn't get his opinion. Again, I appreciate what y'all do, I'm passionate about it. It's a take and it's a pay. I know.
Last time, whenever it was, a couple of years ago, that was a bailout. I mean, the damn champion. Switzer had run the whole freaking ship into the ground. Yeah. Yeah. Whew. Help me, Lord.
I got you.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, against the chamber, everything with Michael.
I don't know, well, he's got it right here. It says 59, but I didn't check it yet. I just take his word for it. Okay.
It is.
Oh, no, their books are in order now. I don't have a problem with it now. Now, before, you would shut them down. Well, now, that's different. That's a board action. I didn't know that before they were gonna do that. That's their own.
Yeah, well.
That computer.
Yeah, I can turn it just into that.
Well, it won't matter. You don't need to show, you'll see the new policy. You heard me speak, so. Yeah, That's right. That's right. I mean, I don't mind funding the big events, you know, because it draws people in, but he has a point. I mean, so.
Yes, sir. How about you?
Yeah.
I appreciate your comments. I know, I appreciate your
For
insight,
Oktoberfest,
and what you have to
because-
say.
yeah,
I respect it.
because of the rain and all that. No, I'm with you, I'm with you. Right, but we have to fund things for our citizens in this park, so, and we don't, and I don't wanna get you involved like Don, they don't need to make money, we don't need to make money as a government, yeah. We fund it and. Now, that's a good point, that's a fair point. Yeah, that's what we gave it to them for.
That's why I had a bunch of other questions. I just stopped.
But you're saying, yeah, you're saying the credit should go to the town of Blythewood, not to Shane Credit. I'm with you. Okay, that's a good point.
That just opens the floodgates to discovery events and come on and get some money.
What I would say is challenge council members to read the
Well, that's what was next.
I'm with you.
That's why I was.
Yeah, you ready? I know, I agree. Remember, it started out that way. What was it called? The Local Merchants Association or something? That's it. Yeah.
We'll have somebody else that might need to draw my own nonprofit. Brock, take your seat, Brock.
We got along.
Come take your seat.
We're gonna have a long executive.
Stop trying to collect the check back there and take your seat. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to talk to Brock, get him in his chair.
What?
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. All right, call tonight's meeting back to order. Thank you all for indulging us for a quick break. Moving to Oktoberfest 2020 for the Greater Blythewood Chamber of Commerce requests. Mr. Hasselrock.
What was the question again?
Next item on the agenda, Oktoberfest. Let's go.
Okay. Well, you all have in your packet the COVID protocol designed by Phil for Oktoberfest. Oktoberfest has been approved by the Department of Commerce. Phil did get a waiver, and he's developed a pretty extensive COVID protocol. Some of the major items, just like for Big Red Barn and T3, Phil states they will have Richland County Sheriff's Department, also private security. They will be EMS services to be provided. We all know what Oktoberfest really entails: music, food, beer garden, children's activities. So Phil has also given out a diagram that shows where the social distancing places will be. It's a fairly extensive diagram, so he has a very well detailed list on what he's going to do for this event, and it's well thought out and extensive, and it pretty much incorporates everything that he could do if you look at CDC and DHEC guidelines.
So only taking the east side of the amphitheater area there, or
Yes.
is it going to be the entire
Right.
thing? Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just, you have little yellow squares here. Did you just leave this other half out for illustrative purposes, or? Okay, that's fine. So, all right.
Was this plan approved by the SC Department of Commerce? Okay. Okay. I just didn't know if that was part of the process or not, but Thank you.
And just for the greater good of the folks, it's 12 by 12 seating pods there, indicated in yellow squares, and there's 3 feet between each pod. So it meets the Department of Commerce's waiver requirement, so it has been approved. All right, any questions? This was a budgeted item.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
I make a motion that we approve it.
okay.
Second.
It's been probably motion and seconded to approve the Oktoberfest 2020 funding. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Comments after the fact?
No,
Okay, action item number 6, Board of Architecture review appointments and reappointments. Ms. Cook, let's put these in the beginning next time, because I know it's past Mayor Bailey's bedtime right now, but go ahead. Go ahead, please, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we normally do the board architecture review appointments in September. The board of architecture review are short a few members and maybe even more short in the near future. So it was important to get this before you this month so we'd make sure we have a quorum as we move forward. Seat 1, as you see in your packet, is vacant, and it's been vacant. It expires September 30th of 2021. Seat 5 is a reappointment, Dr. Gail Costin. The reappointment would be until September 30th, 2023. Seat 6 is vacant, September 30, 2023 would be that appointment. And then seat 7 is a reappointment of Mr. George, Alan George, for September 30th, 2023, if he wants to have that. And those are the 4 that are before you today. We have several candidates that have expressed interest, former Mayor Keith Bailey, former Councilperson Paul Muscati, and current Board of Zoning Appeals member Sharon Pickle. They've all obviously served in the past or are serving currently for the town of Blythewood, and again, they've expressed interest in the Board of Architecture review.
That's right, gentlemen. You see 3 candidates. What we've done is Ms. Sharon Pickle is currently over on the Board of Zoning Appeals, but we're anticipating a vacancy, another vacancy on the bar, and she's volunteered to move over. So we'll appoint her at another time. All right, gentlemen, thank you for volunteering again. You want to say anything? I think we all know you. Normally, we get like a resume and stuff like that, but in this case, clearly not required. But any comments at all? Thank you again for stepping up for the community. There you go. Yes, sir. Do y'all want to do rock, paper, scissors to see who gets what seat? Or does it matter to you? So council members, what we'll do is I nominate former Mayor Keith Bailey for seat 1 and former council member Paul Muscati for seat 6, if it be your will and pleasure.
is Ms. Pickle here?
He is not.
She's still currently on the,
Yes.
yeah, okay, BZA, but she's going to move over in a future date.
I will second those nominations, sir.
I need a motion.
I'll
first.
make
Oh, I thought
I'll
you
make a
meant-
motion to approve that.
Second.
All right,
Okay.
thank you, gentlemen. It's been probably motion and seconded to approve these 2 fine gentlemen to this Board of Architecture review. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you again, gentlemen. And now we move to item number 7 in action items, the Central Midlands Council of Government Board appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is the Central Midlands Council of Government Board of Directors. Needs an elected official to serve as a voting member from the town of Blythewood per their bylaws. According to former Councilman Gorge, who has been serving in that capacity, the appointee shall be a current elected official. Mr. Malcolm Gorge has agreed to attend meetings in a non-voting role and serve as a liaison on any issues related to Blythewood. Put a little background on the COG, and if you have any questions, try to answer.
You two want to arm wrestle for it or something?
No.
Is that- Okay.
I have
Do we
expressed
have-
interest.
Do we have an interest? Okay.
Mr. Sloan Griffin has also expressed interest, so I think it would be the wiser move for the 2 young ones to let the elder statesman decide.
I agree with that. In most matters before. But, okay, so we have to choose among the 2 gentlemen. Okay, how about this, just for the good of the public? Mr. Brock, why do you want to serve on the board of the Council of Governments?
Quite frankly, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to expand my horizons, get to know a few more individuals that are involved in the local municipalities. And the Coalition of Government, I believe that my skills as an accountant and a state employee will further enhance my abilities to bring the information back to council so that we can make good recommendations to and from the council.
Councilman Sloan Griffin, same question.
Yeah, so, pretty much saying traffic, you know, is a good chance, a good point to put Blythewood on the map. Be a little bit more aggressive with some things and make sure that we're being properly counted for, you know, we're talking about funding, processes and things. And I know a lot of folks on this board and, you know what they are bringing back to their councils, or their prospective municipalities. And I think it's time for us to, you know, really take a step up and be aggressive and, you know, keep Blythewood on the map.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'll add one more thing.
Okay, please.
And I believe Councilman Griffin would also agree with this, both of them. I want to thank former Councilman Malcolm Gorge
Absolutely.
for his service.
And he's
on the
still
central-
continuing to go as an ongoing
Yes,
member, so
on the-
I do appreciate
on
him.
the
That's
cog.
an excellent point. Mr. Cook, do we, go ahead, go, please.
One other thing,
Councilman Sloan Griffin.
you know, convenience, my office is like 5 minutes from there. You know, so convenience there to be able to shift over, to take care of that business, with some flexibility.
See. Yes, sir, please.
That's what I got from Councilman Gorge related to an email that he received in response to the fact that he wanted to continue to serve. I can verify that, but that is from him. Mhm. I have to double check with Councilman
I believe,
Gorge.
well,
It
yeah,
was
let's
his-
just double check to be
Yeah,
safe.
it was,
I'm pretty sure it's voting because they reached out to us and said you need to send one of your elected officials.
that's correct.
So even though Malcolm's here, we need an, okay.
Yeah.
We'll check, we'll check.
Upon some clarification. Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Certainly.
I can tell you they sent us an email asking
Yeah.
for a voting member, so.
Yeah,
whatever
okay,
worth
that's
in
fine.
the
We'll
code.
just clarify. I'm sure it doesn't make a difference. They'll still, now, I was going to ask you, Mr. Cook, don't we have similar representation on municipal association? We don't. Now, do we have a liaison, I should say, to the municipal association? Okay. Because what I was going to do is one on one and one on the other. If that's the case.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please.
are we doing this on nomination
Yeah.
or we doing a nomination?
Yeah, do a nomination. Let's pick one of them.
All right, I nominate Sloan Griffin.
All right. Do we have a second for? Second. All right. And then we'll put you on the next one, Councilman Brock. How about that?
No problem.
All right. It's been probably motion seconded to nominate Councilman Sloan Griffin to the Central Midlands Council of Government Board. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
All right, remember
Aye, my vote is yes.
remember the
I thought-
GIF.
I thought it was a salary position, the way you two are over here inflating your resumes like that. I couldn't believe it. But anyway, movies in the park, item number 8, Councilman Sloan Griffin.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council. Thank you, Sarah Lynn. So, I think, as COVID, as we're beginning to open the park and have events here in the park, after talking, with several folks, I think that it would be a good idea for us to, kind of move forward with some movies in the park, using the, concept of a drive-in theater, piece, since we, were not able to have the celebrations that we normally would in town due to COVID. So I'll be brief here. You can follow along there. So we're looking at free admission. Of course, we'll have a certain amount of cars, and we'll determine that, the size of the field. I'm working with Planning Commissioner Erica Page on this, since she done one. So she's wanting to get behind us on this one here. So we'll look at how many cars we can fit out here and all of that. So free admission, but we're putting a caveat on that. We want the attendees, if they can, to donate. And what we're looking at is each movie night, there's a different cause, a different charity that those donations will go to, as you'll see in later slides. We will follow all CDC, DHEC, and Department of Commerce guidelines. So we'll, as us, if we choose to do that as council, we'll just work with staff to submit those documents there. One cool thing that I thought about and was with the food trucks. We're welcoming food trucks out here. So imposing a 2% that off of their revenue to go back to those charitable organizations that we so choose. Next slide, Sarah. So these are the dates right now that we have in the movies. So we're looking at the new Troll movie. So these are all kid-based to get the kids out, family. So we think the Troll movie will be great. The next one will be the Spider-Man. And then looking at the November timeframe, looking at either Home Alone or Harry Potter. So whichever one, sometime Home Alone, from my understanding, the license fee for the movie, sometime it's not available. So if that one's not available, we'll go with Harry Potter. Next slide. So we're still shopping around some charities, but I thought the first one would be great for September the 19th for a local first responder that's suffering from MS. Former police officer for the city of Columbia, to donate to his foundation for MS for that first one. So support local first. We're still looking at charity, picking one for October, and then the Oliver Mission House for November to support the Thanksgiving dinners there. So those will go back there. Next slide. Most important slide is how much this is going to cost. So we're looking at a $5,085 cost total there. That's the screen and sound, and then the license fee. So that's what we'll be looking at as an overall cost to do all of those events. We can do all or choose to do one, or we'll choose to do neither. But I thought this would be a good opportunity, since we're opening the park for events, to get the kids back out safely in cars, and really experiencing something that even for me, in my generation, I never got to truly experience, was a drive-in theater. So, that concept of coming back old school, as Grip is down there smiling. Too many memories from the drive-in, see that? So, you got it too?
Well, no, Councilman Griffin, I am not familiar with the drive-in, but if you and I want to go on a date, we can go to the Big Mo. We can go experience a real drive-in.
Yeah,
Now, did we run these dates by Steve to see if they're available, or this is just a proposal?
No, this is
Okay.
the general net. I will get with Steve on those dates. I did shuffle the October because I knew Oktoberfest when we first looked at these dates. But I know what's better going on out here in the park on those Saturdays.
Yeah, there is a conflict on that October 24th. Trippy wants to have a concert.
Okay. Okay.
on
And
the
that's,
October 24th,
okay.
October 24th.
And that's fine. We're flexible. We can move that, so, yeah.
Okay.
We'll change that. Now I'll get you another date. I'll get what
No,
this
that's fine.
page on that.
I mean, it's not a bad idea. I just-
Great idea.
If you don't mind, I would like to ask one question. I know that they did movies in the park out at Larry Sharp's, the farm, as I saw it in the paper, and it says something like, you can't leave your car, you have to stay in your car. Another question would be, if we're predicting over 250 people, then we would have to go to the DOC for a waiver.
So that's part of the process. We would go ahead and do that with the DOC for the waiver.
Yeah.
We're following the same schematics as they done
Yeah.
in Irmo. So they done the one for Irmo in the
Okay.
park over there, where they used the food trucks to come in, and what they did was not so many, kind of common sense, kind of like wearing the mask. You know, if you don't get out the car if you see 5 groups at the prospective food truck you want to go to. So it's using that little bit of common sense. They marked off spaces for the vehicles, and they marked off box spaces at the
So we have a
food trucks.
template we could
Yes,
kind of use?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
You'll get everything you need.
Okay, be glad to talk to you.
Yes, sir. So, next slide would be questions, so.
The
any
turnaround
questions?
time on these requests, Steve, do you know? These waivers for the Department of Commerce, do we know how long it takes how long did it take you, Mr. Fry? From the time you submitted it to the time they gave you that email? Okay,
Yeah, I think it's fairly quick.
that's good. I just want to make sure, because we're talking September 19th, okay? And I'm okay with the trial and just do the first one and see what happens.
Who determined the charities?
That's just, we work together, but.
Who is
if-
we?
Me and Erica Page,
Oh, okay.
yes. So if we need to change something, we can definitely change something.
Only thing I would add is that if we're gonna have an event in Blythewood, I would like to try to keep the money in Blythewood. For example, like I would recommend Troop and Pack 224 at Trinity, the Boy Scouts. They're having, and Cub Scouts are having a difficult time recruiting and having events with COVID. And so they might be one to fill the
so-
middle one, but
yeah.
just more so keep it
Troop,
local.
which one?
Troop and Pack 224.
224, so they could park cars for you and you give them that
Oh,
charity
there, you
money.
could, you get volunteers, you can,
They can pick trash up after.
they are a 501c3.
And the money you collect for charity that day.
Yeah, so I'm
Stonehouse
cool. That's why I wanted
Yeah,
to put it out to
absolutely.
everybody to,
I mean,
you
there's a
know,
number
what-
of them.
yeah.
We can talk about it, yeah. There's a whole number of local charities.
So we can shift and move as we please, so.
Okay.
Just as long as, you know, we're fine with moving forward before we express so much energy into it.
Yeah.
How has it been received when Erica's done it on her own?
Irmo, it was a sold-out piece, because they sold tickets in the Irmo side, so it sold out in a matter of a couple hours.
Really?
Yeah, so this concept is, you know, is a higher drive than just a normal theater, and it's just really something to do,
Sloan,
yes.
are you gonna open this up? You got a certain amount of cars, or you just gonna open it up to whatever?
So we have to come out here and measure, so we'll have to go through that process to measure. That's why I could not put that in there. We could get measurements pretty quick, so as long as I know council is, you know, pretty much a go with it, you know, we can get those numbers within a couple of days.
Might already be done for you.
It could be. Chamber could
Fry.
have already.
You've essentially, it seems to me that you've done a lot of the work for an event like this, for your 12 by 12 squares and stuff like that. I would park most cars, I would think, wouldn't you?
They allowed 100 cars over at the community center when they did it over there, so they allowed 100.
Yeah, it was community center, not the farm.
Well, they did one at the farm too, but they did one at the
That's right,
community
that's
center.
Communities.
That was the first one they did, and they allowed 100 cars.
So I can get you those statistics and numbers back on cars.
Well, you're talking about a Saturday night, right?
Yes.
Question or comments?
These dates are fluid though, correct?
Yes, they are. Yeah, we can change them up. So if Steve has something on those, like he just expressed, we can change them up.
$3,300 for a screen and $395. $2% revenue is coming back, it's going to charity. Okay.
Yes, so anything that we get from, participants and then off of the food trucks, so we have to develop that understanding with the food trucks to report back, 2%.
I agree with Councilman Brock, the money should go right back here somewhere.
Yes. And, if Councilman Brock wouldn't mind, I would add him, since it wouldn't be a quorum, me and him to work with, Commissioner
Oh, yeah,
Page on that.
absolutely, sure.
in that way.
All right, any other comments? Try funding one and see how it turns out.
I was gonna ask Mr. Cook, where would this come from? Would this come from H tax?
What, we'd have to look and see, depending on which accommodations or hospitality.
I'd be okay with a trial run, see how it turns out. Do one, maybe we could recruit some sponsors.
We can split, we'll talk about it. We could split sponsors, charity sponsors on that day. And just split the revenue
Do that too.
2 or 3 ways.
And that's Mr. Mayor?
Any little piece.
I'm sorry?
Anything else?
No?
Make
You
I make a motion.
Approve it? You wanna,
We're gonna, go ahead, I'm sorry.
is that?
What, you were saying something?
No, I said, we're gonna, make a motion to approve this, or just postpone it, or?
Well, if we postpone, then we would miss the September 19th projected date.
I'll make a motion, we approve.
I'll second.
There probably a motion and a second for September 19th.
We're gonna do, well,
Do that first one only and see how it turns out.
do one, but pending September 19th, I would call it. Since it's not a static date, we need to be ensuring that there's no conflict of the part.
Steve, you don't have any conflicts on September 19th, do you?
No, I don't think so. We do have Big Red Barn September 18th, so you may have to spend some time cleaning up and things get ready for September 19th.
Okay.
Could you flip it by 7 o'clock that night?
Sure. Yeah. I'll have to look at the Manor schedule, but I don't think we have any major events in the Manor on that night. So I have to look.
Does the sound run through cars? Then there wouldn't be any blasting sound apparently, that conflict with any manner. Okay.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments, questions? It's been probably motion and seconded to approve the movies in the park for some Saturday in September. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, thank you. Open citizen comment, if you haven't already spoken and you'd like to.
Mr.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, good evening. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for giving me the opportunity to speak before you all. Just want to touch upon something that I've seen in and around Blythewood. I think the most important thing we need to really focus on in order to get your attention is the public safety. We saw how they trashed the water tank. Now they're tagging over there the car wash. And now we have this other child trafficking going on. So I think there's no better time to be focusing on the public safety. And there's many ways to address this, but I just wanted to let you all to know that
That's one concern. And the other issue I want to touch upon is annexation. I know no cons in annexation. In fact, most of us in here got elected because we were annexed into the town. I know of all the pros, and Councilman Griffin, I got to commend you. That's a genius way to go about getting on the up for a vote and giving everybody to do just what you all said. You said that you wanted the entire zip code to be citizens and participating citizens in the elections and the political process in Blythewood. So I think that'll also take on one of your priorities also. And hopefully you can get that up for a special election when it comes up in a year or so, since we missed this time. Thank you very much. Y'all stay safe out there, okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Again, I just want to thank everyone, the city council, the residents. This was going to be posted up, as the city council said. And again, I love you guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll move into executive session. Section 30-4-70 Alpha Number 2, discussion of negotiation incident to propose contractual arrangements and proposed sale or purchase of property. The receipt of legal advice where the legal advice relates to a pending, threatened, or potential claim or other matters covered by the attorney-client privilege, settlement of legal claims, or the position of a public agency and other adversary situations. And there will be no decisions made on or after the executive session. So can I get a motion to go into executive
I
session?
make a motion.